Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Mittens, and welcome to a video that I've been wanting to do for quite a while now. This is raiding in Warlords of Draenor. What we know, what we can expect from what Blizzard have told us, and what we might be wanting to see in the future, what we might be hoping comes out in the coming days, coming months, until the release and beyond that period. Before I continue, I'd like to apologise if I sound a little bit snuffly, if that's a good word to use. I've got a bit of a cold, but I hope you enjoy this video all the same. Most of you will know by now what Blizzard have said about the raiding structures, the changes that they're making for Warlords of Draenor, but I do want to say my feelings on the subject. And you don't need to listen, you can if you like. I hope you enjoy the video, but anyway, let's progress with it and I'll tell you what I've been thinking. Now, the most important change I think for me that I've heard about is the LFR changes. I'm one of the people who considers LFR to be tourist mode, and that's because recently I geared up about 3 or 4 level 90 characters for flex and normal raiding that I started doing. I haven't been raiding in WoW for a long time, since Mogasham Vaults, so about, I think the last time I raided was a year ago really, and coming back to raiding, I was quite surprised with what LFR brought with it. Here's an example. The first character that I boosted and made was a Blood Death Knight. I played Blood Death Knight during Cataclysm and early Miss Pandaria. I was able to raid all of Throne of Thunder, because you start out with eye level 496 gear, so you need to raid Throne of Thunder to get your high level gear before you can do Siege of Orgrimmar. Sorry, you start with 483 gear, you need 496 to do Siege of Orgrimmar flex, and you get 502 from Throne of Thunder. So I raided Throne of Thunder in Raid Finder first, so that I could get gear to do Siege of Orgrimmar. I raided all of Throne of Thunder as a Blood Death Knight tanking, and I raided the first, I'm going to say 6 bosses. I raided everything up to and including the Dark Shamans as a Blood Death Knight tanking without having to look at any tactics. And that wasn't me being like a noob or a scrub or anything. I just deliberately wanted to see, knowing what Raid Finder was like, how far I could go tanking, just going off my wits and what I could see what was happening, what was being said in LFR, which is not very much, as you might assume. And I managed to get that far before somebody pointed out to me, asked me if I'd read the tactics. And it was at that point where I thought, well, that's how far I got. Halfway through the last tier of content, half of the bosses. So I considered LFR to be tourist mode, and I have done. I always have done. I consider it to be tourist mode just because of the fact that it is too easy. You can be part of an LFR group and not do anything at all. You can literally just cast one ability the whole time. You could stay out the fight, and if people didn't notice you, you wouldn't die, and you'd be able to get that loot. That's just the way it is, I'm afraid. That's why I call it tourist mode, because you don't have to do anything. You're effectively a tourist. But good news about that in Warlords of Draenor, in my opinion, because it seems that LFR has been nerfed heavily in terms of what its uses are, its relevance to both new and seasoned raiders, and the gear that it drops, and that's where I'll start. We now know that there will be different sets of gear that come with LFR, different to normal and heroic, which are in turn different to mythic. This is a good thing, because it removes 2 negative stigmas that I think. First of all, it removes the idea that new players who do LFR and don't know better won't anymore think that they're raiding the end content, because they're not. They're effectively, it's even easier than looking for group, because in looking for group, because there's only 5 of you, you have to pull your weight, at least to a certain extent. And it also takes away the problem of seasoned raiders who might be doing normal content or heroic content currently, who have the same gear just slightly recoloured as people who are doing LFR and might not have done anything to get that gear at all. So I think it's really good that the LFR gear is different to the actual raided gear, and I'm going to say that word because LFR, in my opinion, really isn't raiding. It's got none of the challenge of raiding. It's got none of the enjoyment and none of the social interaction that raiding brings with it. Furthermore, the LFR gear not only looks worse, in my opinion, from what we've seen so far, but also it looks less detailed. It looks like Blizzard is saying this gear isn't as good. It's like they're not just in the stats, but also physically saying this gear isn't as good. Go out and progress and get better gear. Another thing that I like about LFR in it being nerfed is that it won't really place a high reliance on people gearing alts, people boosting their friends, and new players themselves to do LFR. For example, when I boosted these characters, I had to do Throne of Thunder, LFR, and then I had to do Siege of Orgrimmar, LFR. And you have to do that quite considerably, because you have to have a certain eye level before you can do Flex, and so on and so on. And it gets really boring when you're just sitting there doing LFR constantly. And by the time you get to normal, let alone heroic at the moment, God, you'd be so bored of the content. I can tell you now, I've moved with the main character I'm playing in Elemental Shaman onto normal content now from LFR and Flex, and I'm already sick of those bosses already. So, my opinion really is that LFR getting nerfed is a really good thing. It's a really good thing. And a further comment that I'll make, not specifically about LFR, but about all of the raiding, but it does incorporate LFR, is that all these different raid modes now have individual lockouts. This is a good thing, and I'll explain why. For example, say that you and your guild are doing Flex, and you raid Flex on a Wednesday, and you manage to clear everything. Now you guys might have a lot of players in your guild who want to do more, who want to progress, they want to continue, but they can't do any more Flex. However, it's not a case of them now thinking, oh well, that's our raiding for this week done, we'll continue, we'll do Flex when it resets next week. No, they can now say, oh, but it's only Flex which is locked out, Normal's still available, why don't we try Normal? That's a good thing. It kind of pushes people to try harder difficulty, to push themselves, and that can only be a good thing for the player base, in my opinion. Now let's move on to Flex mode. Now Flex mode is being removed, but at the same time it's not, and let me explain how this is. Essentially, it's making everything except Mythic Flex. LFR, Normal and Heroic will all have the Flex system. So whether you've got 10 players or between that to 25 players, you can do LFR, Normal or Heroic. This is a good thing. It means that most guilds who will probably be doing Normal or Heroic, that's what most guilds will be doing, don't have to have a set amount of players. You can try out new people, you can have raid trials. It gives new players more of a chance to get into a raiding guild, and that's a good thing. Also, it means that you're not reliant on a set amount of people turning up, as I've said. If you are, for example, raiding in if you're raiding in a 25-man guild, you like to do 25-man, but let's say 3 of your members, for whatever reason, don't turn up, you can still continue and do your heroic content. It might be slightly scaled down, but by how much, realistically speaking? So that's another good thing in my opinion. You know, that, in my opinion, it's really good that all of these different raids have Flex. It just really does increase the availability, and I think it just takes the pressure off guilds to only have set amounts of people and turn away new members. It gives them the opportunity to say, no, you know what, come along and do this Flex. And for example, if you've got one hardcore raiding team who are doing 10-man heroic, you can have another team made up of those who aren't in that team, because there won't need to be a set number, a set style. That strictness seems to have gone, and I'm happy about that. Now I want to talk about Mythic. Because let's be honest, Mythic is kind of the thing that's taking the limelight quite a lot. And for an obvious reason. Mythic has been penned, it's been dubbed as the new form of hardcore raiding. I can't tell you how many people, and you'll have seen this yourself, advertising for guilds going forward for Mythic raiding. Trying to increase our roster for Heroic, going into WoD for Mythic raiding. Putting together a Mythic raiding team. All of this stuff about Mythic raiding. And that's where the linchpin is, in my opinion, for the raiding format. For Warlords of Draenor, it will rise or fall based on that. If Mythic is good, awesome. If it's bad, well, we'll see. But this is my problem with Mythic. Say you've been in a 25-man guild doing heroic content for years now, for the last couple of expansions. You've gotten to know your players, you've had a few people change over the years, but you've got a good team, and you're happy with that size. When Mythic comes out, if you want to do that hardest of the hardcore content, you will have to get rid of 5 of your members. Somehow, whether you put them in a different team, which increases the awkwardness because you'll have to recruit 15 other members, or whether you just drop them entirely and make them go back to doing heroic, you're probably going to end up kicking 5 of your members, whether it's just from the team, or indeed from the guild. And that produces a lot of stress, a lot of problems, a lot of tension. And we've got to ask ourselves, why was it that Blizzard decided to pick 20-man? as the format used? Why not keep it at 25? That's something that's up for debate there. But you know, the problem also stands at, for example, if you're a 10-man guild, it's perhaps even a more complicated problem. Well, if you're a 10-man heroic guild, and you've been doing that heroic content for so long now, and you're happy with your core 10 men, you're going to have to double the size of your raiding team. And I think that's something that a lot of guilds will struggle to do, especially with the demand. You know, the demand. And will there be the supply of players ready to just move into Mythic? I'm not so sure. Maybe it'll balance it out, as in maybe you'll have people from the 25-man heroics going to the 20-man mythics of other guilds who are going up from 10-man, but it sounds quite complicated. People have mixed ideas as to if Mythic raiding will deliver. Some people I've spoken to seem to think that it will simply replace heroic and that the other forms of raiding will scale down. I mean, this could make sense. At first I thought, well, maybe that's just a skeptical attitude, but this could make sense, because you've got to bear in mind that the flex mode as an individual mode of raiding is being forgotten, abandoned. It's being incorporated into the other styles. So there will no longer be the 5 styles of raiding there are now: LFR, flex, normal, heroic, and then mythic, which will come out. There will be LFR, normal, heroic, and mythic. So maybe it'll scale down. Maybe LFR is getting easier, yes, but maybe normal will replace flex in terms of difficulty, and heroic will replace normal, and therefore mythic will just be the same as heroic is currently. I mean, how much more difficult can things realistically get without being, I don't know, problematic and broken? The simple fact is that with mythic we cannot really assume too much until we experience it. We're not used to that kind of content. We're used to heroic now. We're used to these raid styles. 20-man hasn't been around for a very long time, trust me. We can only hope that Blizzard succeed in their aim to create a raiding system which incorporates the desires of as large the population as possible. My name is Mittens, and I hope you've enjoyed this little talk about raiding in Warlords of Draenor. I'll see you in the next video I make.